Yes, that's right. This isn't clickbait. The housing market could crash by 50%. But it greatly depends on your own point of view.
A certain point of view?
Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
A nominal decrease could be 20%, which we're seeing play out now in some markets. But 50%? That's where the word real versus nominal comes in.
So this is a chart that I pulled from the Federal Reserve, and this is a median price of existing homes throughout the United States. So you can see that massive parabolic climb that happened in January of earlier this year in 2022, and then it peaked out in spring essentially, and then it's started its descent to where it is today in the fall. And what this looks like is the median housing in 2022 is down 26% from its peak, and that's in nominal terms. So that what you saw exactly in that chart, where the prices have come down. But again, this is location dependent because not every place is actually falling. There are still places, believe it or not, within the United States, although very slightly, that are still increasing in prices. These are the boring markets that kind of always move up very, very slowly, even in boom times. So that's why they're boring. They don't increase crazy and they don't decrease crazy. Now, all of them probably could come down as the Fed continues to push rates up, but this is currently the situation where most of this 26%, in fact, some places is more. That's where the average comes in these higher metro areas. This is a chart that I pulled, and the reason I'm pulling this one from Shadow Stats is because the Federal Reserve quit including food and energy prices in the CPI. So while we are all hearing that inflation peaked at about a little over 9%, and now it's somewhere around 8 something, and maybe even 7 something, this is actually worse, because when you include food and energy like they used to in the 1980s, and now they disclude it so that they can hide the rage from everybody, you can see it's actually worse right now than it was back in the late 70s, early 80s. And we're peaked out somewhere around 17.3, and now we're in the 16% range. So this is where I say it's a certain point of view when you see the real price drop. Because when you add inflation, which is the devaluation of the dollar, all those dollars in your pocket are now, you can't buy as much as you used to, compared to last year. And then you combine that with the housing decrease nominally. That's where you can get, we can see it going to a place where it could be, like a 50% drop. So let's look at right now. You've got like I said, the 17.3, it peaked. Currently it sits around 16%, which is the real stat, the shadow stat, when you include food and energy, because those are the things we actually need. It's funny that the inflation stat that you're getting is really on consumer goods, like it could be clothing or TVs and stuff like that. So that stuff doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters, but compared to food and energy, that really matters. So when you take the devaluation of the dollar into account from that increase, it's actually 14%. And the decrease in the value of the dollar of what you can actually buy, you've lost that much purchasing power. And so the inflation percentage may come down, but that doesn't mean that we'll get back to 2019 prices in consumer goods, food, and energy. And to be clear on that, if that's not clear, So inflation percentage, as you see, it was like the one they give you is like 9 point something percent, and now it's 8%. Well, that's just, now it's 8% higher than it was last year. It doesn't mean like prices are falling, as you can see when you go to the grocery store or anywhere else. It just means now prices are going up slower than they were, but they're still going up. So that's why you still have to count in that devaluation of the dollar. And so going back to this chart, and this is an interactive, it is an interactive, but I copy and pasted a screen grab. So I'll show you the numbers here. So this will show you the inflation, housing inflation, which equals the real price versus the nominal. So that peak that you saw on that chart is $413,800 for the median price of a home. And that equaled a $1,940 mortgage payment because the percentage rates were 3.85%. I know they were lower before, but we're just going to compare apples to apples from when this peak price hit versus the mortgage payment rate. And then the median price now is $319,000, but the percentage for a mortgage has gone up. And I just grabbed this off the internet now, what it is now, at 7.463%. And that gives you a $2,641 mortgage payment every month. So that basically your mortgage on average across the US, mortgage payments have gone up $1,000. That's pretty crazy for the average person, because that would be high even in a place where you make a decent chunk of money in the metro areas. And I think it's even worse there, because like when I look at a house that I was looking to buy in spring at the 3.85% versus now, my mortgage payment would have easily gone up by $2,000 or more. So basically what you're seeing here on average across the entire US, that's a 27% increase in your monthly payment. And so while the price of the house fell nominally, the monthly cost has gone up by 27%, which is pretty crazy. So what this tells you is like, crap, I was actually better off buying a house at a higher price earlier than what they are now, because now my dollar's worth less, and the the monthly payment that I'm throwing out there for the house has gone up also, even though the price of the house overall has gone down. So what I'm concluding with this little slide deck is that you shouldn't have that fear of missing out. And there will be another shot at this, and I think it's going to be pretty soon, really, because the Fed is beginning to break things, although I'm pretty surprised the stock market has held together as well as it has up to this point, considering how fast they've raised rates. But these rates that they have right now, they're pretty normal historically. Like, we had insanely low interest rates the last couple of years, never before seen historically low rates. So these are actually normal rates when you look at a chart overall. The problem is our economy is addicted to cheap money, and that's why things should get worse for housing, and that's why they're percentage-wise, and even when you factor in inflation, they are basically over what they were price-wise during the 2008 crisis. The difference is that we don't have those insanely poor loans that were given out to people who couldn't afford them. But anyway, point is, there is going to be an opportunity where all of this information, all this data will come together to a perfect, I shouldn't say perfect, but to a decent spot where it's a good time to buy. And the unfortunate part about that is it means more money printing, which means more inflation, which means something horrible to distract us while they blow the currency into oblivion. And the last time they needed to distract us was in the end of 2019, when the repo market started to crash in September of 2019. And they used the pandemic, unfortunately, as a distraction to just explode the M2 money supply. And while they're trying to pull back on that now, they're going to have to switch gears at some point, because once the economy is clearly in a recession and people are clearly, about to revolt really from such a horrible economy, that's when I think you'll see a new distraction, which I think they've been building up, and we'll dive in deeper into this video.
To see that, we have to look at government spending versus quantitative tightening. For the first time in 40 years, they're going in the opposite directions. The problem is that the last time this happened, the national debt was 30% GDP, and today it's over 130%. That's the highest in US history. The government is addicted to monetary heroin, as Peter Schiff puts it. They've forgotten that government spending doesn't matter, that budgets do matter. In the past, China, Japan, and other governments around the world would buy treasuries and fund the US government spending. And the Fed had to do much less to prop up all of this spending. Today, China's backed off and in fact sold many of their treasuries as it weans itself off the US dollar. They've also been working with the BRICS nations and most heavily with Russia to create a new monetary system to ensure that they can avoid US sanctions and continue to trade with one another. It looks like we will have at least two systems, the West versus the East, so to speak. There's still going to be a need from the East in some small capacity for the US dollar being the reserve currency, but they are working to make that zero. Because the Fed is raising interest rates, the US dollar has gotten very strong, so capital is flowing into the US as a safety. That is currently the only thing keeping money flowing into the US government spending that is absolutely out of control. That can only do so much, because remember, the interest is also increasing on the government debt. So while the government is able to pay off its higher value debts with dollars that are worth much less due to inflation, this is the hidden tax on all of us, it now also has to pay a higher interest on its massive 130 trillion in debt. Those interest payments will soon surpass the massive military spending per year. $390 billion in interest payments just this year. And within a decade, it's projected to be $900 billion in interest payments. That's nearly $1 trillion per year just to pay interest on the national debt. That's an unimaginable debt spiral. Somewhere the Fed pivot has to happen just to keep the interest payments down from pressure from the government. If it did stay neutral like it's supposed to, they'd tell them to cut government spending, which is the real problem. That's why this is monetary heroin. The government is hooked on the Fed, and the Fed is its dealer or enabler. I'll go back to when Obama fired the first shot in the new World War III. Obama started a currency war in 2010 by cheapening the dollar. I remember moving to Canada in 2011, and the loonie was worth more than the US dollar. I paid off all my student loans at a discount, and I remember seeing the bottom of the US housing market that year. A house right down from my parents' street near a private lake in the suburbs of Seattle was going for $230,000. That was insanely discounted after the housing bubble in 2008. I knew it was a good deal, but I talked myself out of it. What if the Canadian dollar collapses, which it did? How would I pay that loan back? I had no financial education at the time, so I walked away from it. If I could go back in time, you could go back in time with the financial education I have now, I could have easily rented out the property with a property manager, and that would have covered all of my expenses, super easy. The hindsight part of the story is that I could have actually taken out a loan in Canadian dollars to protect the losses in the value that I predicted in the loonie. I could have also turned around a few years later and sold it for $600,000, or during the pandemic at $800,000 or more. All in US dollars, which would have been over $1 million in Canadian.
Man, I wish I could go back in time. I'd take state.
Later, Trump escalated World War III with tariffs on China, which is a tax on the American people, but it also sped up the process on the China-Russia moving away from the dollar as well as a shooting war. Now Biden baited Russia into a shooting war with Ukraine by forcing a NATO membership onto Ukraine and put the US in a proxy shooting war with Russia, which would be like Russia putting a military base in Mexico or Canada. We'd be mad too. And I'm not making excuses for Putin. I think he's just as evil as our leaders. All of these bums need to be thrown out as far as I'm concerned, and we normal humans can live peacefully. But anyway, you can see where all of this is going. The slow, steady drumbeat of war. And why, you may ask? Well, if you go back in history, it's because the US is in the death throes of its superpower empire. It has no easy way out of this disaster that it's made with the US dollar, and the US dollar is printed out of thin air and backed by nothing, except for the might of its military. So it needs a war to desperately cling on to its empire and to keep its thumb down on the once free American people. What does this have to do with the housing crash by 50%? Well, because all of this is intertwined. War needs printed money. The Fed was created to get involved in World War I in the first place. The US wouldn't have been able to get involved without it. So in order to keep us preoccupied, not focusing on inevitable inflation, they need to print money. And war is an easy preoccupier of the population to keep the money printing going. So if we can look at where all of this crisscrosses, we'd be able to find the prime time to buy rental properties and a house of our own. So let's revisit. Fed interest rates are causing roughly a 20% nominal price reduction in housing. Because the value of the dollar is also falling against the things that we need, the real value destruction will be much higher, which is that 50%. The Fed is causing a recession and they will be forced to pivot, bringing interest rates back down, but inflation will kick up again, causing a sweet spot to buy just before the massive pivot where you'll be able to refinance. And I believe this will coincide with a shooting war, but that may not be necessary, so the two could happen side by side. Because this all hinges on a few central planners instead of the free market, which is why you need to pay attention to what they say between the lines for your perfect buying opportunity. So stay tuned.
This is pretty much the worst video ever made.
Napoleon, like anyone can even know that.
You know what, Napoleon? You can lead.